Should. All right, we are now live. Okay, well, buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos. My name is Dr. Valerie A. Martinez, and I'm the History Program Head and Assistant Professor of History at Our Lady of Lake University, and I welcome you to, again, the penultimate installment of the Critical Pedagogy Workshop Series designed to introduce educators, students, and community members to strategies that will help promote inclusivity and equity when engaging students. Whether this is in a classroom setting, a student organization, or community-sponsored event, anyone can apply these strategies. So I thank our institutional sponsors here at OLU, including the Office of Academic Affairs and the OLU Center for Mexican American Studies and Research, as well as Humanities Texas for funding this programming. I would like to reintroduce Dr. Rosalind Evans and thank her once again for her presentation last Thursday, Moving Beyond the Binary, Illuminating Inclusivity in Academia, and thank her for today's workshop on syllabus redesign. Dr. Evans is an assistant professor with Wharton School of Social Service at Our Lady of the Lake University. Through her work with youth at risk, she developed a passion to work towards creating welcoming and inclusive spaces, regardless of race, age, gender expression, or sexual orientation. She is a Safe Zone Ally facilitator, co-founder of the Thrive LGBTQ+ support group, and one of the co-faculty advisors for the Alliance Student Organization at OLU. Her research interests focus on the coming out process, campus climate, identity development, and intersectionality. So thank you again, Dr. Evans, for leading the syllabus redesign workshop. We're so excited to continue this conversation.
Well, thank you again for having me. Hello to everyone who is joining this afternoon. Yes, so last week we were able to discuss and talk a little bit about moving beyond the binary and illuminating inclusive spaces in academia. And I provided a few examples and talked a little bit about terminology and discussed information on ways that we might be able to incorporate usage of pronouns and inclusive language, more so in a classroom setting, but absolutely ways that we can incorporate this in academia on campus and engagement interaction, regardless of it just being within a classroom setting taking place at the university. So I had a few examples and a few graphics that we kind of went over, looking at concepts relating to gender, gender identity, gender expression, discussing intersectionality, and sex assigned at birth. So, and another thing that we did was looking at doing an assessment. So taking the opportunity for you all to engage me in participating and kind of identifying some things that you're currently doing in regards to kind of moving beyond that binary and creating inclusivity within a classroom setting or within just your practices as faculty members. But I am aware that we may have faculty, staff, students attending in this space. So for the redesign for today's session and ways that you might be able to incorporate these components in your syllabus redesign, I have just a couple of things. I didn't really put too much of a PowerPoint together. I wanted, and I say that because when developing these things, I always think about, okay, where is my audience at? What knowledge do they have around these topics? What interests do they have around these topics? Really being aware, do I need to focus more on examples? Do I need to focus more on statistics and data and information, relating to this information? So just really being aware of where the audience is at and questions that you all may have for me and ways that I can be of support in providing guidance of material and content relating to this topic. So I know there was time for engagement during our last session. So I want you all to know that it's open for engagement today. So please feel free to use the chat. Feel free to ask me questions. I wanted to start off again, and I know I said I didn't want to overwhelm you all with PowerPoint, but I do want to share my screen just with some content for those who were not able to join us last week during the session. To be able to view. So give me one moment, see if I can share this. Okay. Here we are. Okay. So some things that I just wanted to talk with you all about in regards to ways that you might be able to further develop your syllabus or incorporate content and your settings to be more inclusive is really just kind of starting out within the beginning of the course, incorporating a message of kind of accountability, expectations of how the course is expected to flow, but creating a space of talking about inclusivity and recognizing a space for respect of individuals within the classroom setting. And I know many of us may already do this, right, in developing our syllabus and content for the course, but really sharing with students this information in the syllabus, then also incorporating it within that first week of the class, and letting them know about the importance that will be taking shape with respect of diversity and inclusion within that space. And so in sharing that as kind of an opening, I'm curious to know, do many of you do this already within your course settings of incorporating a message of inclusivity and diversity and looking at respect for peers within that space? You wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, and I think I still have access to the chat.
I know personally for me, yeah, as Dr. Villarreal was saying, I could do better for sure. And I mentioned that, but for folks who are coming in out of the class that first week, I think it would serve students better if I had it in the syllabus for everyone. Maybe they forgot, right? But I think I need to incorporate this into the syllabus for sure.
Okay. Thank you both for sharing. And I will say I had some examples for my syllabus pulled up, but unfortunately my USB is not reading my syllabus, so it's not allowing me to give some examples. But it's something that I've worked on incorporating in my classes of expectations. So I have expectations for students revolving around the components of like inclusion, respect, being mindful of different backgrounds and views being brought into the classroom space, but using that as an opportunity to further engage and develop and learn of different perspectives as we go over content. But then I also put expectations that they can have for me within that space throughout the course, and also being able to express respect, understanding, and being open-minded to different topics, because I share with them, you all are bringing yourselves into this space with various backgrounds, beliefs, identities as well. And as I learn from them, as they learn from me, I also learn from them. So I found it to be helpful to have that message in my syllabus, and then also go over it again that first week and just letting them know. I will share again, teaching and social work, we do talk about a lot of various topics that really align with our students' lived experiences. So it is even more important that I reiterate throughout the course of making sure we're creating a space of respect and open-mindedness to diversity that's coming in from not diversity about just identities, but perspectives about topics that we're discussing in the classroom, which certainly,
I
oh, go ahead.
I'm
Yes.
so sorry, Dr. Evans. I had a question. Okay, so I mean, I completely understand our focus here is, the syllabus redesign. But
Mhm.
for folks out there who may be students or K through 12 educators, what is another way that they can do this outside of a syllabus? So what are other ways? And I honestly don't know what K through 12 teachers are allowed to do. I mean, I would hope that this would be permissible to include this on their syllabi as well. But what are other ways that maybe they can post in their classrooms or students when engaging or beginning meetings or putting it in their student organization charters or something? What are other ways that we can do this outside even just the syllabus?
Okay, that's a very good question. So there definitely are different ways. I'll give an example. So I've starting out in social work, I was working in K through 12 school settings, mostly with middle school and high school settings. And so early on with going into those spaces, working with our youth, we talked about setting essentially ground rules, if you will, for the classroom environment, and sharing with them kind of those expectations that are set in place by the school setting and specific by the instructor or teacher in that setting for the classroom, but then opening up to allow students to also share and engage things that they want to incorporate as a part of the ground rules, but really highlighting and putting in respect and looking at dignity and worth of individuals within those settings, and letting students know that um, through even in middle school and high school, there are going to be conversations, there will be topics that some of you may not be familiar with, there will be terms that may be new to you, but being in a space to be open-minded to have conversations and further develop knowledge around these topics as we move throughout the course. And I'll be honest, with working with youth, more so in middle school and high school, I would get nervous sometimes of, oh, okay, I don't know how they're going to feel about these topics. I don't know how this is going to go, what things like they might share. And when it came to them being able to participate in sharing kind of those ground rules for the course, it was very eye-opening to know what perspectives they were coming from and saying, we want to make sure everyone's voices is heard in this space. We want to make sure there's a no bullying zone taking place in this space. So allowing them to hold themselves to be accountable to the goals and kind of ground rules that they've incorporated within the classroom setting as well. Working with instructors in the spaces of high schools and middle schools, making sure that they are aware of differences in terminology, components of identity. So we would do different sessions and trainings with the teachers in those spaces, and then letting them know about resources and tools. Because a lot of times they would share with me, well, I don't really know about some of these terms, or sometimes I'm just not necessarily fully comfortable or that knowledgeable in this topic, but I want to include these things within the space to let students know that we want to create more inclusive and safe spaces. So there's handouts, there's posters, there's different resources that they can use within the classroom setting. So if, say, we're going over pronouns, there may be a day where someone unfortunately misgendered a student in class, being able to have those tools and say, remember when we being aware of pronoun usage and how individuals want to be identified. We've gone over these charts, or these are located throughout the room for you all to be able to have access to as reminders. So there are different tools and resources through GLSEN and Campus Pride. Those are two organizations that offer posters, handouts, and resources that can be incorporated within not higher education, of course, higher education, but also mostly when thinking about elementary, middle school, and high school, because what I realized when I come into those spaces, sometimes maybe a little nervous and not sure how students will feel about these topics, particularly in middle school, these students were already experiencing awareness of what their identity meant and what it meant for them to be non-binary, and how it meant to be friends with someone who identified as a lesbian. So these terms and stuff, they were already figuring out and learning and knowing, but they weren't necessarily seeing it in the classroom setting, or having examples of diverse identities outside of a kind of heteronormative perspective within the classroom. So it made me aware to be more cognizant of creating more inclusion, because a lot of these students are identifying within these spaces already with these identities. And I realized once we started incorporating more inclusive language and activities and resources, more students felt comfortable to express their identities and even explore their identities in those spaces. So I hope that answered your question. I know it's kind of long-winded, but they're
No,
definitely,
that was perfect.
yeah.
Thank you. And then, as an educator who has taught at multiple levels, you're kind of K through 16, right? Have you ever faced resistance from students or parents kind of at any level? And if so, how did you navigate through those conversations? And then I'll let you keep going through those PowerPoint slides. It's just a question that popped in my head. So you can either answer it now or later, whenever you think it would fit the conversation. But I just have that question, if you faced resistance and how you navigated through that.
Okay, and yes, please keep the questions coming. Anyone who has questions, that's a part of the space, right? Being able to have dialogue, and I will tell you all now, if I don't know, I will do my best to get you connected with the resources and content that is the appropriate response. But a really great question: have I ever faced resistance from students or parents? And absolutely, yes, across any any aspect of education, yes, I have. How many examples could I share? There definitely have been a few. I'll share one as a professor within the social work department at a university I was teaching at, and I was fairly new to teaching at that time. So it was I think the first week of class. Yeah, it was the first week of class, and we were going over content. pertaining to it was like a theory course for social work. And so I was sharing with them some of the expectations of the class and assignments and chapters and talking about different communities we'll be focusing on. And I had began to share about the LGBTQ community and content we will be covering over that. And I had a student in the course who stopped me in the middle of sharing and speaking about it. And they were just like, I don't understand. What does this have to do with the course? Why are we talking about this? Why are you bringing this up? This doesn't make sense to me, or why we have to take time to focus on this. And I don't agree with these things or feel comfortable with them. And it was a full class. It was probably 40 students in the course. And so everyone kind of just really quieted down. It was right at the end. We had snacks, laughs, shared introductions, all of that. So it's like, oh goodness, I'm at the podium. How do I respond to this? So it was a really, great question that he was presenting. What did it have to do with the class? And I shared with him, with the other students as well, that within this course, we will be talking about various aspects of identities and communities and populations, and looking at populations that are considered to be oppressed or marginalized, in ways that we can be aware of how we can advocate and support various communities. And I shared, it's in the textbook, it's a part of our profession. I showed him, like, all these different receipts, right? Like, why we would be talking about it in the classroom setting. And they said, okay, thank you. And other students were kind of like, well, what makes one population more oppressed than the other? And I was like, well, we kind of had a conversation around that. It's not saying, oh, my oppression's way worse than yours. It's just looking at a level of communities that unfortunately experience forms of oppression, discrimination, and marginalization. And so at the end of that class, the student came to me and kind of shared a little bit of, a little bit of uncomfortability and resistance. And I shared with them, the importance of our profession and expectations within our profession of working with clients, and just awareness and kind of ways that we can navigate through those spaces and learn with each other. And a very unfortunate event occurred in that space. Other students, they were placed to work into a group for that course. And then other students came up at that time and expressed uncomfortability and not wanting to no longer work with that person in the group due to their own identities being a part of that community. So it really created a space of like, oh, I'm the professor. I think I'm the one who's supposed to deal with this stuff. So really trying to step in and then navigate those conversations with the students, and being aware of what that looks like with working in a group where we're trying to learn and understand together. And by the end of it, there, with that resistance and pushback, we came to a space of them saying, we're going to understand that we're going to be learning from people. There's going to be different backgrounds and ways that we can move forward. So at the end of the class, definitely came to some resolution around it. But unfortunately, I want to say that following week, that student sent me a very powerful email telling me how much they could care less about the LGBTQ community and my issues. So kind of identifying myself to be a part of that community when I never self-identified to do so, and a lot of other, unfortunately, nasty negative things. But with that email, it brought into some awareness that social work was not for them, and for many different reasons. So it was kind of one of those gatekeeping events, but definitely had some resistance and pushback from students, from parents as well. There is a coalition that I'm a part of in Mansfield, Texas, and those students have a GSA, so a Gay Straight Alliance, or gender and sexuality alliance on their campus, and not a lot of parents are in support of that. And students have reached out trying to get like resources and supportive counselors, and we do have some parents who are not in support. We've sent out educational information. We try to host events at town halls. We go to board meetings for the district to just be a space of visibility, representation, and offer welcoming spaces to have conversation and provide more education on it. And I'm happy to say more parents have been coming. They've been engaging in those conversations and looking to provide support for students, because before there was just nowhere they could turn to for resources. So I definitely have had some experience in learning different ways to navigate through those conversations. And I think when working with youth, sometimes it's a little different if I'm working in a space with that youth being my client, and looking at aspects, of course, of confidentiality and creating safe spaces for them versus what it looks like in my classroom setting as well. So, um, oh, sorry, I've just been talking. I didn't know if I missed any other questions that came.
No,
Okay.
not yet. That was amazing, and wow. So one question did pop up right now. What resources are there on campus, so formal ones, if we have a student that needs support? So I guess particularly here at OLU, but we can kind of think more generally on other organizations or resources on campus that others might have or that should assist, right?
Okay, that's a good question. So I actually had one of my GRA students work with me last semester, or could have been the semester before last. Time is kind of gone crazy. But they actually put together a resource handout. So with that resource handout, it has resources specific to the university and some in the local community, and also national resources that students can turn to if they're needing forms of support. And so on it, there's information for our counseling services, of course, on campus, as well as OLU Cares. So there's been many students who have come to me and come into my office, and I have sat with them as they made the call to OLU Cares, or even walk them over to, the OLU Cares office, so they're able to speak with someone or have someone to talk to, regardless of different experiences that may be relating to components of their identity. And the students have always shared that that's been very helpful as a form of support that they've needed. Students who have walked over to the counseling office, or again sat with them as they made the call to counseling services. Another thing that we did, me and Maddie, who's the other co-advisor for the Alliance, last fall, we had some opportunities of kind of a self-care check-in with students, and it was open to students, staff, faculty, to participate. And we were able to have, Dr. J come in and speak with students about ways to be aware of practicing self-care, components of being who's a safe person to go talk to if needed. And it was a very, very great event. Definitely had students come out and participate, and even faculty participate in that, and just identifying welcoming resources and support systems on campus. Also through the health portal, of course, and um, there's a few other resources that are on that handout specific to the campus, but I always turn to OLU Cares and the counseling services. And I also let students know if they're having, concerns with like courses or other forms of support, to be able to reach out to student services to be able to get support there as well.
Great question. Thank you so much. And yes, we're looking to compile all these great resources because Dr. Evans has mentioned so many really, really amazing things that we can put in our classroom or on our doors, or and also have that resource list to share would be great to show what's
Yeah.
at OLU, but also in the larger San Antonio and national communities. So that would be great, Dr. Evans. Now, if we could turn, I know there's people, I know questions, several questions are popping up in my head, but if we could look at some specific other kind of ways that we can incorporate this into our classroom. So we talked about on the syllabi. Do you have other examples of ways that we can also promote inclusivity, or send this message of inclusion and respect within our classroom, or when engaging with other students?
Okay, yes. So I know during our session last week, we talked about introductions, right, at the beginning of the course, and thinking about ways we might be able to include information in our syllabus or in our classroom. So on my syllabus, I do provide my pronouns so students are aware under my name. And I keep in mind that when talking about pronouns, um, even if someone does have pronouns that people may not be aware of or knowledgeable of, or in a space of, if we have pronouns as faculty or staff, or individuals we may not feel comfortable sharing within a school setting, but we share with our friends or family. I always want to say that making sure that it's a space where you yourself are feeling safe and comfortable to do so as well. Unfortunately, not just at this university, I'm just speaking in general. Um, there are some universities that have pushback and resistance from faculty doing that. If they have a pronoun that may be neutral, and some students have expressed concerns with that too. So I always want to, while I share like, oh yes, put your pronouns on stuff, I want to be mindful of if you are feeling safe and comfortable even to do so, and being mindful not everyone has those opportunities to do that. So I do want to express that. But for me, I do include my pronouns on my syllabus, and then I also have it on my signature in my email, and then I also share them in my introduction at the beginning of the course. With students, I create a space for them to also be able to share with me how they self-identify by allowing them to share their names and their pronouns if they would like to do so. With us being virtually, I have done it in different ways where they can email me a form with their information, or they can provide it in a voice or an introduction video. There were some examples I talked about last week with using, if for example, say if a student wants to share with me their pronouns, but they don't want their peers to know those pronouns, having that space where they can email that information in, or if in a course setting, they can bring those documents up to me and at the end of class or during my office hours. On the sign-in sheet, there's options if students want to be able to put their pronouns as well, or the name that they use. And for various different reasons, students may have a different name that they use that's not aligned with what's on our printouts for doing roll call. So I'm always mindful of that and just making it very normalized, right? Just having conversations of our identities and how we see ourselves and want to be recognized and addressed in those spaces. So those are some things that I incorporate within the classroom in the beginning, and some activities throughout the course, making sure that I'm using inclusive language. A lot of times we'll see that binary again of she or he. So instead of including she or he, I'll use they as a singular form or a plural form, or I'll use she, he, or they to incorporate inclusivity when providing examples. When I'm sharing activities or content with my students, I make sure to incorporate various components of identities into the activity or assignment. So if I'm sharing a case study, I make sure that I have diversity and gender identity, diversity and sex assigned at birth, and diversity and sexual orientation of the individuals within the case study. So students can begin to see what that might look like, presented with who they might see as a future client. Again, from a social work perspective, who they might see as a future client. If you're not in social work and say you're in a different discipline, you're still wanting to prepare your students to be aware of these real world situations when they have coworkers or colleagues that might have identities that are different from their own, and ways that they can be aware and cognizant of seeing gender neutral or inclusive terminology and identities and spaces. So those are just a few things that I want to incorporate. And then I know sometimes the questions come up of, how do I go about doing that? So how do I create a space that's neutral if I'm not necessarily as sure of how someone may identify? So early on in my classes, I always like to say, hello everyone. My students always say, I always say greetings class, or class, how are you all doing? Instead of just saying, ladies and gentlemen, or, hey guys, or hey ladies. I want to make sure that I'm being inclusive in that aspect. So just being aware of terms that you can use that kind of breaks that binary to be more inclusive. Oh, I see a comment has come through right quick.
Yes, it states, I've had a student who transitioned during the semester and their name and pronouns changed. They did not want to make a general announcement, so the instructor started using the name and pronouns they wanted, and the class seemed to follow without issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that example. And I've had this happen in some of my classes as well, where names and pronouns may change throughout the semester. And I have some students who will come to me and say, these are my pronouns, this is the name that I'm going by, and I feel comfortable sharing it with you, but I don't want to use this in the class. So not having me address it within the class, but when referring to them, I've asked, is it okay via email if we use this language, or in spaces one-on-one, is that okay? Is that something that you feel comfortable with? And then shared yes with me, while other students I've had come tell me, these are my names and my pronouns. Moving forward in class, this is how I like to be addressed. And through voice thread and online assignments, this is how I'd like to be addressed. And making sure that I follow suit with that. And I'll ask them, do you want me to share this information with the class, or would you like to share this information with the class? And we'll move throughout that. We'll move forward with that. So working with youth in middle school and high school, when this has occurred, the students have shared with me, I'd like to make an announcement within the group, because we would do weekly groups. And so I would create that space to allow them to do that, and opening up and being mindful to be respectful and aware of differences, and thinking about how we would want someone to be respectful and mindful of our identities as well. And so within my courses at the university level, giving again that space for students to share with me if they would like to share and make an announcement, or how they would like to go about incorporating. And knowing I've had students share their name and pronoun, and it changed 2 or 3 times throughout the course, and that's absolutely fine. That's their name and pronouns, and when they share with me, I follow suit, and just making sure that I'm aware of what that is for them and not providing any judgment around that. I think unfortunately sometimes when students are sharing components of their identities, oftentimes people feel different ways about it, or, oh, well, you don't look to present this way, so I can't use that because I'll get confused. So maybe if you change your attire to present such a way, it might help me. It's completely not okay at all to try to tell someone how they are expected to dress, behave, or act for us to feel more comfortable with their identities. So I like to keep in mind being respectful and mindful of that, and letting them know this is your life, your experiences, your journey, and this is how you're identifying. I want to be respectful of that. And just a couple of other examples. If we're not sure of someone's pronoun or how a student might identify, I always use their name, and the name that they share with me, they want me to use. So I always refer to them in regards to their name. And then I will ask, how would you like to be identified, or how should I address you? Just to make sure that I'm being aware. But I try to create, again, normalized conversations about identities and self-identifying and pronouns with my students, as well as I share my own, to kind of model what that looks like, in case, again, preparing them for what that'll look like in the future when engaging and interacting with others. Did I have any other questions or comments regarding to like those experiences of thinking about creating inclusivity in your classroom or work environments? Did you all have any questions for me pertaining to that, of what could be more helpful, or some things you had curiosity about in regards to that?
I also had a few questions in terms of the actual kind of like getting down to the curriculum. So what types of assignments, or for example, for history, I usually assign a historical novel, right? So I recently changed, and next semester I think I really would like to use the Americana book. So are there any other specific kind of, you know, again, like assignments or books or something that or articles, that you would say would help students kind of understand that? So in case we were to engage with a student who had questions, we can say, oh, here, I'll explain it this way, but if you read this article, that could probably help you as well.
Yes, very good. So I do have articles, I have handouts with information that kind of gives examples and breaks down different concepts and components as it relates to gender identity and the importance of diversity and inclusion. There is research and materials on inclusivity in academia. So looking at ways as faculty to be a little bit more comfortable and knowledgeable about different approaches that we could use for inclusion. I have literature that I can share on that. Um, as far as like activities and examples, I can share those as well. And it kind of breaks it down. I know Vanderbilt has a really great a resource center that they offer looking at gender inclusivity and awareness. And this is one of the handouts provided here that kind of breaks down pronouns and ways that you can use them, and using, again, kind of looking at that affirmation and survey to identify ways students might want to identify within a classroom setting. And then examples of if you are teaching a science, math, art, you name it, how we can work about using inclusivity within activities or assignments throughout the term. I also teach the LGBTQ issues course, so there's different information that I use in that class as well, considering ways to be inclusive and why it's important and how it impacts learning environments for students, as well as some activities that allow them to think about um, ways that they can be aware of providing, support, resources, and services to communities that are different or diverse from themselves. So I don't mind sharing any of those resources. A lot of um, content, again, so looking at Campus Pride Index that helps you know about different resources and material that share universities that are inclusive and supportive of students and their identities, and kind of looking at how they're rated on that scale. And it's a website that students actually, I've done some research looking at students picking universities to attend, and they look for those things. Is there inclusivity shown within the university's website, the department's website? Do they have visibility or representation of faculty or staff within these communities that I might be a part of? Are they using pronouns or using inclusive terms when referring to things in their recruitment or program handouts? And so with Campus Pride Index, it rates a university based on ways that they have inclusivity offered at their campus. And students will go and select universities based on how they feel it gets inclusive. So having gender neutral restrooms being offered, having housing opportunities for students, having trainings and resources or organizations on universities is helpful. Um, I do not believe OLU has a rating yet. That was something I was interested in doing as a campus climate to see if OLU could be incorporated as one of those students universities to be a part of the Campus Pride Index. It does require a packet to come into the university and then to do an assessment on making sure that you're offering these things on your campus to be considered a inclusive and welcoming campus. And then once you complete it and have the evaluation done and submitted, and you've identified your scores, and the Campus Pride Index will refer back to you and let you know things for improvement, right, in areas that you can develop further. And then if you've met the criteria, you then will be added onto their website for individuals to be able to search and know that it is an inclusive space for students. It does, I believe, a lot of schools who have like diversity centers on campus or LGBTQ programs on campus or organizations, those things are also looked at to know as a form of support. And I know I was sharing other things earlier and completely went over my head to say the Alliance is definitely another form of support where we'll send students and let students know if you are looking for community or to develop friendships or just engage with others. The Alliance definitely puts on different events throughout the semester. I know it maybe has not been as many this spring term, but I'm trying to incorporate conversations and topics looking at various forms from relationship conversations revolving around that, mental health, creating support, looking at inclusivity regardless of gender identities, having observance of different days and events taking place. So that's another resource that we try to share with students. I think that's a great idea. Oh, yes, please go right ahead.
Oh, yes. So, yes. So a couple folks are commenting here in the chat. Is Olu rated on that index? And if not, how can students go about doing or being on the list? And you definitely gave us a great explanation. And another comment, the index audit could be a good activity for the inclusive strategic planning working group. So yes, and they're going to discuss this at the next meeting, which leads me to my next question in terms of we're talking about how we can do this in our own classrooms. And this is at an individual level, as you as an instructor, you as an educator, or you as someone who engages with students. What are ways that we can also kind of engage our students with the larger community? Because we know right now in the Texas legislature, we're going through a series of anti-transgender bills. So what are something that we can do, kind of to extend these ideas of inclusivity and respect, not just in our classroom or with each other, for folks who adhere to these ideas, but to spread them, do you do any type of civic engagement in your classes? And if so, what does that look like? And, yeah, if you can talk about that. Thank
Okay,
you.
that's a really great question. And I definitely have some examples and um, ways that we really talk about these things at not necessarily just a local level, but a regional and national level. But I did see I have another question. Dr. Anderson, if you would like to unmute to share an example with us, that would be great as well.
Thank you so much. This workshop has caused me to reflect on when I've had students engage in gendered discussions and debates in the past, like deconstructing some evolutionary psychology's, assumptions, for example. And I'm all the more aware of how it's not helpful to divide students according to gender. And so, I'm rethinking about how to handle those kind of in-class discussions The other thought too is I did have a guest speaker come in and ask me about, how many students in the class are male, in front of the whole class. So just kind of thinking about how to handle, I guess, those situations, certainly myself, but also when I'm in, kind of related to that question about when others challenge or others come with a different framework, how to respectfully respond to that in a way that honors the fluidity of gender and the way all our students identify.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that last component, honoring and recognizing fluidity, because gender can be very fluid throughout our classrooms, and thinking about ways to create those spaces to recognize that. And I've had many students reach out to me, sometimes even after my class or during the class, and tell me, this is a class where I honestly felt I could be vulnerable. I felt like I could be safe. And I share with my students early on, I know I can't necessarily say this class is a safe space because it may not feel safe for everyone in here. But recognizing vulnerability will be presented. People may find spaces to be brave when talking about content. um, and I say brave, not necessarily, oh, this person is identifying within the LGBTQ community and they're being brave of their identities. I'm sharing even as someone who might identify as, a uh, heterosexual, cisgendered individual, being brave to have conversations and dialogues on topics they've never had conversations or explored before. So really just being open in those spaces to be able to just share, and reminding students that gender is diverse, and it can be fluid in many different ways. And I shared with you all before, I will have students share, well, there's only male and female, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I bring up receipts of historical context and literature and evidence that there have been many genders around for centuries throughout the globe. And there's this awareness of these individuals living and thriving in society in many different ways. And I think what some components of just really growing up in such a gendered society and ways that we view things, even with our language, with clothing, in many different ways, it's just ingrained in us, right? It's something that we've been conformed to within context of how we address and interact and engage with one another. And it's not that um, the fluidity was never there, it just showed up all of a sudden, or all like people are just now starting to have, non-conforming or non-binary genders. It's always been there, but we really just focus on ingraining in more of a binary component of male and female. Um, so I think it helps me when I'm having these conversations in my classrooms to fall back on historical things and literature and information that proves these things, to be aware that these identities have existed. It just may not have been something you learned in your history book, but they have existed. And so talking about the current client and the ongoing client with policy and just things happening in our society, I know, again, I try to be aware of how this could look different in other disciplines, because in social work, I teach policy. So I teach policy, I teach research, I teach theory, I teach LGBTQ issues. So I'm always trying to incorporate real life experiences and things that are taking place with things happening. And I love the fact that Professor Medina also has really been great about incorporating this within our courses for our students. And so being active on the community level and hosting symposiums, conferences, having students go to the Capitol when it's National Social Work Day at the Capitol. So having students get in the van and go to Austin and be able to speak to legislative about these concerns and issues that are taking shape. And usually on that day, that it's Social Work Day, you also have individuals from Tent, Transcendence, which these are organizations that advocate and create resources and support for the transgender community, to be able to bring awareness about those experiences as well. And even other LGBTQ organizations from Denton to Dallas to Fort Worth to San Antonio, Arlington, and Houston, you name it, coming to the Capitol and having those conversations. I incorporate bringing in guest speakers into my classroom because I know a lot of topics, I can talk about them all day, but it's helpful for students to be able to have someone come in who works in that background, who identifies with different identities, to come in and share examples as well, in ways that students can be aware and knowledgeable of things happening that are ongoing. And particularly for my LGBTQ course, I won't say particularly for it, for my other courses as well, but I make sure I tell my students we are living in a society that's ever changing and evolving. So when our textbooks are talking about same-sex marriage not being possible, 10 years ago, 15, 30 years ago, it changes over time, right? Policy is changing, and it's important for students to be aware of what that policy looks like and ways that it impacts their lives, their neighbors' lives, their families' lives, and ways that they can play an active role in being aware of using their voice. Of course, if they have the opportunity to vote, because I'm aware not everyone does have that opportunity, but ways that they can advocate and speak out against these injustices that are taking place, or creating more equity and inclusion on topics and conversations that are important to them, and wanting to bring awareness and space about. So I will have guest speakers come in. I will have students engage with opportunities to engage with organizations in the community that focus on creating inclusion and diversity in regards to identities. So the Pride Center, the director of the Pride Center has come out and spoken at the Safe Zone ally trainings that we've offered annually, and that's been a really great help for um, individuals all throughout the state of Texas to be able to come and participate and learn about things that are changing and newly being implemented, and ways that the local community is working to be more inclusive as well, and also identifying areas of further development and ways that we can improve. And I think that helps students to be able to have a place to know already ways that they can make a change and difference within their communities, within their neighborhoods and households, by engaging with organizations and programs locally and even at a national level. So I hope, again, I just keep feeling like I'm so long-winded, so I apologize, y'all, but I hope that.
No, these are great. Keep the questions coming, folks. Keep the question coming, and you can also unmute yourself if you like. And if you don't have that capability, Dr. Villarreal can most definitely provide you that ability to unmute, and you can ask your question. I do have another question in terms of, man, it was at the tip of my tongue, and then I started talking, right? So let me see. Let me think what it was about.
It will come back. I
Yeah,
promise
it was
you.
a good one too. It was a good one, I tell you. Now let me, oh, I just forgot it. Here, let me give someone else a chance to ask the questions, and then I'll probably
Okay.
come back to mine.
Well, I'll share an example, and hopefully the more I jab away, you'll be able to
I'll
remember.
remember
And
it.
of
Yeah.
course, if others have questions, please feel free to use the chat, or even feel free to ask me about experiences, examples, you name it. I was going to share in one of my courses, I've had students
Oh,
do an
got
activity where they developed um, an inclusive program that focused on supporting and empowering the LGBTQ community. And it had to be a program that they developed here in San Antonio. And it gave them the opportunity to talk about, okay, who will be the population of interest? What will be the requirements or inclusion that allows an individual to be able to engage with access to this program? I thought about the students had to think about ways that they would have funding for it, how long the program would run for. So really creating those opportunities for them to develop things like that. We've had students come up with the idea of doing a film showing at OLU to create conversations and dialogue on spirituality and religious aspects and ways to be inclusive of identities. We had students come up with creating an event at Market Square to incorporate artists that were within the LGBTQ community and create kind of educational components and featuring art and work and talent. So it's really just creative ways that they can think about engaging and becoming more knowledgeable and highlighting more visibility of LGBTQ identities. We also went over historic things and identified what are some policies that are taking shape and in the formation of whether being presented in the House or being addressed in the Senate, and ways that they can advocate and reach out and address these concerns locally and to congressional committee members. And the students have done an excellent job in writing letters and making phone calls and incorporating what they can do in regards to addressing them. Okay, questions about administrative support. Very great question.
Yes, I got it. Okay, so we talked about kind of resistance that you faced from students and some parents in terms of your coursework, or your the courses, right? Have you ever faced any type of resistance from the administration? And if so, again, how did you navigate through that? And if how if there are folks out there who are facing types of administrative obstacles, what is the best way to kind of circumvent those and to demonstrate the importance of this cause?
That's a great question. Really great question. And I'm thinking again of all these different roles I've taken on in school settings, not necessarily just universities, and experiences I've had with administration. And I have to say I'm a little surprised in some aspects to my experiences, more so being in Oklahoma and working in middle schools and high schools and having conversations of diversity and inclusion in regards to moving beyond the binary, and having support from the teachers, having support from the principals, and being able to incorporate that. I don't know if anyone on here was able to attend. We had our first virtual Safe Zone training take place this past February due to the pandemic, which is typically held in November, right after LGBTQ History Month, and typically before Transgender Day of Remembrance. But we moved it to February this month. And I had a colleague, one of the first social work jobs that I had, who was on our panel. And throughout our conversation, we were able to talk about our experiences being individuals working in a school setting, and us self-identifying with our students, and how our students responded to that, and how the administrative responded to that. And it was positive. We had support. We had individuals wanting to learn more and become more aware. At a university level, as far as any pushback or support, I can honestly speak to my experience at my previous university. We had a multicultural affairs department on campus that had an LGBTQA program. We had a lot of support from our administration of the university to have weekly, monthly conversations and dialogue on this topic. We had specific counselors on campus who worked with students who were within the LGBTQ identity. So there was just a lot of support and feedback, and further developed awareness on our campus. Within the classroom setting and department, me being a social work professor, it was always supported. When I had that experience with that student, I felt honestly defeated. I didn't know how to go about it or how to address it. And I reached out to the director, because at the time I was a PhD student teaching. And so I reached out to kind of just get some guidance on how to direct it. And I was unanimously supported by the faculty in the department in addressing the issue. So I've always had administrative support. Being here at OLU, being able to have the opportunity to teach an LGBTQ course, offer a safe zone training, do a lavender graduation, host events, and collaborate with other departments and organizations on campus has been supportive. I haven't received, me specifically, I can't of course speak for anyone else's experiences, but specifically I've had support, and looking at ways that we can develop and create it, or have further conversations and dialogues on these topics. If someone has had concern or issue, it hasn't been specifically addressed with me. I've had a lot of students, and even students' parents, come and speak to me about how that they are thankful to see these things taking place. And there's been a few events where we've actually held, and I know Professor Vasquez supported in putting up framed pictures. I think it was for Women's History Month, that incorporated various women and aspects of different identities. So, it was trans women, it was women who identified as asexual, women who identified as lesbians, bisexual, and had them hanging up in the main building, and just kind of brief bios for all of them. And I've had many people come speak about how that meant to them to be able to see those forms of representation and see something like that being presented at the university, having screening events for Black History Month and doing photo events for that, having students, staff. I've had people even from the cafeteria coming and saying, wow, this is so great to see we're having these conversations and this representation. So As far as that regard, I feel like I've gotten support in that. I've applied for many funding opportunities for Hearst grants and Flashman, and I've gotten support with that to promote and create spaces for education and conversation on LGBTQ identities and moving beyond the binary and conversation. So those are just a few examples. Of course, I can ask and look and develop and see if there's other ways that I can look into creating spaces like that at the university and see how that goes in the future. But um,
Yes, Dr. Evans, I just this is Aime Villarreal. I was just wanting to commend you, on all of the work that you've done, with the Alliance, and those public displays and exhibits. They were really wonderful. Especially, I really enjoyed the one for Black History Month too, that highlighted LGBTQ folks, within, African American history. But I mean, I have to say that your work has really transformed Olu, because I didn't see those representations when I first got to Olu, and we did not have a lavender graduation. And so I think that you've opened up these spaces, and you and the students in the Alliance have really done a lot of incredible work, to start these conversations and to create more inclusivity on campus. So I really commend you for that and appreciate you tremendously for that work.
thank you so much for that. And I remember just being new faculty and just kind of like, oh, is this okay? Are we going to be all right with this? And students just coming by and enjoying it and taking it in, and other faculty and again, staff coming in and just being in those spaces and just sitting and reflecting and creating a sense of community from it. And also sharing, hearing from students like, I had no idea this person was in the LGBTQ community, or I had no idea this artist wrote work that focused on queer identities. And so just having those educational components with it speaks a lot. But I think really creating a space of community and just kind of sharing like all are welcomed in this space. I know really a lot coming from the students. They're like, Dr. Evans, I want to do this. I'm like, what's your plan? How are we going to execute? What's that going to look like? What supports do you need? And really just going to work and moving forward. So having welcome back events, it's like, we want this to be for all faculty, all staff, anyone working on campus. They can come and they can enjoy these things. And we want these things to be open and free. So getting donated pancakes and spreads for breakfast, I still don't know how they did it. But the concept of creating this long table and just welcoming everyone into that space and looking out and seeing some of our faculty, seeing some of our staff, seeing some of our student workers and students from different orgs and different levels from PhD to incoming freshmen sit at those tables and have conversations. Like, it really just highlights we're all people in this world, just navigating, exploring aspects of our identity and trying to be supportive of one another. And it really just creates a sense of humility and humbleness to be able to witness that. But I share, and I thank you again for those kind words and being able to see the work that the Alliance has done and ways that I've played a portion of a role in helping that come to be true. But I think for me, it was really helpful having someone kind of see in me the opportunity to do these things. So, and I'm getting a little emotional, but I know Professor Medina and a lot of the work that she has done, and seeing for me like, oh, we're going to do this class and then Raj, you're going to teach it, or the students need you. They want someone to help them with this org so it doesn't go away. Like all these different things and opportunities. And I'm just like, me, like I'm, still trying to figure it out and navigate these things. Are people going to approve of this stuff? How will the students feel about me putting on these events at the university? And outside of that, just the support that's come in from her and paving the way for a lot of these opportunities to happen and be built over time at the university, and other faculty as well, and other students, and just work from the administration and work from faculty and advocating, and students saying that there's a need and wanting these forms of support, being able to support me to be able to hopefully continue to bring that and work alongside people who want to create those spaces as well. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't always get it right. I may not always have all the best ideas, but when students present stuff to me and there's a way I can support or try to create it, like that's I see myself wanting to show that authenticity about myself and that visibility and let them know I want to be a person here to support you in what you see for your experiences as students to prepare you to go out into the world. And I had many students share, like, I've never learned this stuff in high school. Like, I can't talk about it with my family. Not many friends create that space for me, but in your classes or in your office space or these activities, I'm able to do that. So if I can continue to create those spaces and opportunity, by all means, I look to do that, but it is really helpful to have people who were visible and trailblazers, to create those spaces for me to be able to do those things and allow them to, try to thrive at the university. So I thank you again for those kind words.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Evans. And this is also being promoted live via the OLU Center for Mexican American Facebook page. And we had a question from the audience come in. And I guess if they're asking if you can explain the goal, the mission for this workshop. So in one sentence, right? I know you've kind of already been doing this, but I feel, I wanted to make sure this person's question is answered. So what is that one line that you would like to really show of the significance and importance of this workshop today? And again, we thank you so much for being a trailblazer in your own right. We thank Dr. Cynthia Medina. We thank Dr. Yolanda Escobar Rodriguez and the social work program for, again, helping guide and helping, again, like you said, create these spaces, and everyone else in the social work program that are doing some great things, but we're especially indebted to you and your efforts at what you have done as an individual. So again, in kind of summation, what is the main kind of goal and mission that you would like that folks get from this workshop? And it's a lot,
That
right?
is no, that's an excellent question, right? Coming into it's like, what am I taking away from this? And I know we started out with kind of going over ways of that you can incorporate things into your syllabus, into your classroom with activities. And then I wanted to make sure I had the opportunity for questions to come in. So I know those questions may have kind of geared us in different topics, right, moving throughout our conversation. But one goal that I would really like for people to be able to take away is the importance of making sure that we can create inclusivity and inclusion when developing our syllabuses, when developing components and activities and assignments for our classroom, to create spaces for students to be aware of diverse identities and diverse experiences and ways that they can engage and be mindful when moving forward throughout their time and in our programs and preparing them to go out into their careers. So really being able to take away components of how you might be able to do that within your syllabus, within your classroom, by being aware of diversity and gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we see a lot of thank yous in the chat here. Again, I forgot my video. A lot of thank yous in the chat here, thanking to Dr. Medina as well for being a great mentor, thanking you for your hard work of making OLU more inclusive, and we're glad that we're seeing ongoing continuous improvement. And we have also a course number for you, so it's a social work 4390. And also we do also have CMOS 3310, Voices of Women of Color, which also focus on LGBTQ issues. So we're trying to do this across multiple disciplines. And again, Dr. Evans, thank you so much for your work. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. This will be live as well on the OLU Mexican American Studies Facebook page. If you want to return to it pretty quickly, it'll be done, after we click stop recording, and then we'll compile these and get the list of and PDFs and whatever else Dr. Evans is going to provide us. We'll put that together on our SharePoint as well, and I'll figure out a way to put this so that way outside OLU folks can have it. This will be accessible to all. So thank you all again. Thank you, Dr. Evans.
Thank you. And I will get all those resources for you for activities, content on how to have conversations about identity in your classrooms, how you can use examples for templates for your syllabus. I will provide all that information so you all will have access to it.
Yes, thank you, thank you. All right, folks, we'll see y'all later. Thanks, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.